The sound wasn't a crack. It was a thunderclap that echoed through the entire courtroom of the soul. The 72-year-old Wendell Washington didn't fall because he was weak. He fell because the weight of a corrupted badge struck him across the face. They thought he was just another statistic. They thought he was just a confused old man in a rusty Buick. Officer Dax Holloway smirked as he wiped his hand on his uniform, thinking his power was absolute. But he didn't check the old man's ID, and he certainly didn't check who was sitting in the back row of the courtroom waiting for the perfect moment to destroy him. In the next few minutes, you're going to witness the most satisfying instant of karma ever recorded. This isn't just a story. It's a reckoning. The sun hung low over the sleepy town of Oak Haven, casting long golden shadows across the pavement of Route 9. It was the kind of day that felt suspended in amber. Slow, quiet, and peaceful. Wendell Washington hummed along to a Sam Cooke track crackling softly through the speakers of his 2011 Buick LaCrosse. The car was pristine, smelling of peppermint oil and old leather. At 72, Wendell moved a little slower than he used to. His joints complained when it rained and his eyes required thick bifocals. But his pride was intact. He had spent 40 years carrying mail for the United States Postal Service, walking the same 6-mile route through rain, sleet, and snow until his knees finally gave notice. He checked his speedometer. 33 in a 35 zone. Perfect. He was on his way home from the pharmacy, a white paper bag containing his insulin sitting securely on the passenger seat. Then the lights flashed. Blue and red strobe lights shattered the calm of the cabin. Wendell frowned, his heart giving a nervous flutter, a relic of growing up in the South during the 60s, a fear that never quite left his generation. He signaled, pulled over to the gravel shoulder, and put the car in park. He kept his hands at 10 and 2, visible and still. In the rearview mirror, he saw the patrol car. A figure emerged. It was Officer Dax Holloway. Holloway was a man who wore his uniform like a costume of war rather than a pledge of service. He was thick-necked with a buzz cut that was growing out unevenly and sunglasses that hid eyes known around the precinct for being devoid of empathy. He walked with a swagger, a hand resting casually, almost lovingly, on the grip of his service weapon. Holloway approached the window but didn't say a word. He just stood there chewing gum loudly, staring down through the glass. Wendell slowly rolled the window down. "Good afternoon, officer. Was I speeding? License and registration." Holloway barked, ignoring the greeting. "Certainly," Wendell said, his voice steady but respectful. "I'm going to reach into my glove box now." Holloway didn't nod. He just leaned in, sniffing the air theatrically. "Smells like air freshener, a lot of it?" "Trying to hide something, old man." Wendell blinked, confused. "It's peppermint, officer, for the smell. Old cars get musty." "Step out of the vehicle." "Excuse me." Wendell gripped the wheel tighter. "Officer, I'm a diabetic. I just picked up my medication. My blood sugar is a little low and I really need to get home to eat something." "I said, step out of the vehicle." Holloway screamed, his hand flying to the door handle. He wrenched the door open. "Now." Wendell unbuckled his seat belt, his movements shaky. He swung his legs out trying to find his footing on the uneven gravel. "Officer, please. I haven't done anything wrong. Turn around. Hands on the hood." Holloway grabbed Wendell by the shoulder of his tweed jacket and shoved him forward. Wendell stumbled, his hip slamming into the hot metal of the Buick's hood. He gasped in pain. "Spread 'em." Holloway kicked Wendell's ankles apart. "Why are you doing this?" Wendell wheezed. "Resisting arrest." Holloway muttered, patting him down aggressively. "Resisting? I'm doing everything you say." Holloway spun Wendell around, grabbing him by the collar. The officer's face was inches from Wendell's. "You're resisting because I say you're resisting." You got an attitude, Pops. I stopped you for a broken tail light and you start giving me lip about your sugar. My tail light isn't broken, Wendell said, glancing back. I checked it this morning. That was the trigger. Holloway hated being corrected. It was a challenge to his authority, a slight against his ego. The smirk vanished from Holloway's face, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. You're calling me a liar. I'm just stating a fact. Smack. The sound was sickeningly loud in the quiet air. Holloway's open palm connected with the side of Wendell's face with the force of a hammer. Wendell's glasses flew off, skittering across the asphalt. The old man crumbled. His knees gave way and he hit the ground hard, the world spinning into a blur of gray and blue. Get up! Holloway roared, reaching for his handcuffs. Assaulting an officer? You're done. Wendell lay in the dirt, blood trickling from a split lip, his vision swimming. He couldn't find his glasses. He couldn't breathe right. As the cold steel cuffs bit into his thin wrist, he didn't cry out for mercy. He closed his eyes and whispered a single prayer. Lord, keep my boy calm when he finds out. The holding cell of the Oak Haven 4th Precinct smelled of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies. Wendell sat on the metal bench, shivering. His jacket had been taken during processing. His insulin was still in the car, which had been towed to an impound lot owned by Holloway's brother-in-law, a common racket in the county. Wendell checked his watch, but it was gone, bagged as evidence. He could feel the tremors starting in his hands. Hypoglycemia was setting in. Officer! Wendell called out weakly to the guard station. Please, I need my medicine. Officer Tate, a rookie who looked barely out of high school, looked up from his phone. He looked conflicted. He had seen Holloway bring the old man in. He had seen the bruise blossoming on Wendell's cheek. He knew the assault charge was bogus, but in the 4th Precinct, you didn't rat on Dax Holloway unless you wanted your locker glued shut or your backup to get lost during a shootout. I'll ask the sergeant. Tate mumbled, not moving. Time passed. 300 miles away in a glass-walled conference room in Washington, D.C., a phone buzzed. Special Agent Quentin Washington ignored it. He was in the middle of a debriefing regarding a multi-state cartel RICO case he had just closed. The director of the FBI was sitting at the head of the table. Excellent work, Washington. The director said, closing the file. The cartels won't recover from this for a decade. You're due for some leave. Take 2 weeks. Quentin nodded, his face a mask of professional stoicism. He was 6 feet 4 inches, built like a linebacker with eyes that missed nothing. He was known in the Bureau as the Ghost because he moved through investigations silently, dismantling criminal empires from the inside before they even knew he was there. The phone buzzed again and again. Take it, Q. The director said. Only family calls 3 times in a row during a debrief. Quentin stepped out into the hallway. Washington. Quentin. The voice was frail, trembling. It was Mrs. Whitaker, his father's neighbor. Mrs. Whitaker, is everything okay? Is it, Dad? Oh, Quentin, it's terrible. She sobbed. I saw it from my porch. The police, they took him. They hit him, Quentin. They hit Mr. Wendell and dragged him away like a dog. The air in the hallway seemed to drop 20 degrees. Quentin's hand gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. His breathing didn't change, but his eyes went dead. Who took him? Oak Haven Police. That awful one, Holloway. Quentin knew the name. Everyone in Oak Haven knew the name. Dax Holloway was a high school bully who never grew up, just got a gun. Where's he now? The county lockup. They towed his car. Quentin, his insulin was in the car. Quentin hung up. He didn't run. He didn't yell. He walked back into the conference room, picked up his jacket, and looked at the director. "Sir, I need to cash in that leave immediately. Everything all right?" "No, sir. A local Leo just assaulted a federal agent's father and denied him life-sustaining medication. I'm going home." The director, a man who had seen everything in his 30-year career, saw the look in Quentin's eyes. It was the look of a predator that had just picked up a scent. "Do you want me to make a call?" "No," Quentin said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I want to do this by the book. I want to see them lie first. I want them to put it on the record." Quentin walked out of the Hoover building and into his black government-issue Tahoe. He didn't turn on the sirens. He didn't speed. He drove with the cold, calculated precision of an executioner. When he reached Oak Haven, night had fallen. He went straight to the precinct. He didn't flash his badge. He didn't wear his suit. He wore a hoodie and jeans, looking like just another concerned son. He walked up to the desk. "Sergeant, I'm here for Wendell Washington." The sergeant, a man named Nolan with a coffee stain on his shirt, didn't look up. "Processing is closed. Come back tomorrow for arraignment." "He's diabetic," Quentin said. "He needs his insulin. If he's sick, the jail nurse will see him in the morning. Now, beat it." "He might not make it to morning." "Not my problem." Nolan grunted. Maybe he should have thought about that before he assaulted an officer. Quentin stared at Nolan. He memorized the shape of his face, the name on his badge, the time on the clock. He was gathering intelligence. "Okay," Quentin said softly. "Tomorrow." He walked out. He didn't go to a hotel. He went to his father's house. He booted up his laptop, a secure bureau terminal. He plugged in an encrypted drive. "Computer," he muttered to himself. "Pull up everything on Officer Dax Holloway. Financials, complaints, body cam archives, emails, text messages, everything. Text. Text." As the progress bar loaded, Quentin sat in his father's favorite armchair waiting for the sun to rise. The storm was coming and Oak Haven had no umbrella. The morning of the arraignment in the Oak Haven Municipal Court was a theater of the absurd. The air conditioner rattled, fighting a losing battle against the humidity, and the gallery was packed with the usual suspects, petty thieves, traffic violators, and family members praying for leniency. Wendell Washington was shuffled in with the first group of arraignments. He looked terrible. His skin was gray and clammy, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. His lip was swollen to the size of a plum, turning a deep ugly purple. He leaned heavily against the railing of the defendant's box, his legs trembling visibly. Judge Everett Langford sat on the bench. Langford was a man who had been ruling Oak Haven for 20 years with a gavel in one hand and a scotch in the other. He and Holloway's father used to hunt deer together. In this town that bond was thicker than the Constitution. Case number 492, the bailiff droned, State vs. Wendell Washington. Charges: speeding, resisting arrest, assault on a police officer. A murmur went through the crowd. Wendell Washington, the mailman, assaulting a cop. Prosecutor Claire Nolan, the sister of the desk sergeant who had ignored Quentin the night before, stood up. She didn't even look at Wendell. She just read from the file. "Your Honor, the defendant was stopped for a routine traffic violation. He became belligerent, refused to exit the vehicle, and when Officer Holloway attempted to assist him, the defendant struck the officer. We are requesting bail be set at $50,000 given the violent nature of the offense against law enforcement." Wendell tried to speak, his voice rasping. "Your Honor, I didn't silence." Judge Langford snapped, not looking up from his paperwork. "You'll get your turn, Mr. Washington. Though I have to say, hitting an officer at your age, you should be ashamed." Officer Dax Holloway sat in the front row, arms crossed, chewing his gum. He smirked at Wendell. It was a look of pure predation. He knew the old man couldn't afford a lawyer yet. He knew the public defender was overworked and would push for a plea deal. Plead to the assault, do 6 months probation, lose your pension. That was the game. I'm setting bail at $50,000, Judge Langford announced, raising his gavel, and I'm ordering a psych evaluation to see if you're senile. Objection. The word cut through the noise of the courtroom like a razor blade. It wasn't shouted, it was spoken with a baritone resonance that vibrated in the chest of everyone present. Heads turned. The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Quentin Washington walked in. He wasn't wearing the hoodie and jeans anymore. He was wearing a charcoal-tailored suit that cost more than Judge Langford's car. His shoes clicked against the linoleum floor with a rhythmic, terrifying precision. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a stack of files in the other. He didn't stop at the gallery railing. He unlatched the gate and walked directly into the well of the court. "Who are you?" Judge Langford sputtered, face reddening. "You can't just waltz in here." "Bailiff, remove this man." The bailiff, a heavy-set man named Carl, stepped forward, hand on his taser. Quentin didn't even look at him. He simply held up a gold badge. It wasn't the small shield of a local detective, it was the heavy, distinctive shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Step down, Carl," Quentin said calmly. Carl froze. The badge caught the light. "Special Agent, Department of Justice." Quentin turned his eyes to the judge. "I am Quentin Washington. I am the defendant's son. I am also his counsel for this arraignment. Pro hac vice. And I'm objecting to this bail on the grounds that the probable cause statement is a work of fiction." Holloway stood up, his face flushing angry red. "He can't be here. This is a local matter." Quentin turned to Holloway. He looked the cop up and down, dissecting him. "Sit down, officer, unless you want to add perjury to your list of mistakes today." "You threatening me?" Holloway snarled, stepping forward. "I'm advising you," Quentin said, his voice dropping an octave. "You falsified a police report. You claim my father struck you. Yet I have the metadata from your dash cam, which you conveniently turned off after the stop, but the buffer recording captured the 30 seconds prior. It shows you striking him." The courtroom went silent. "That's a lie," Holloway shouted. "The camera malfunctioned." "Did it?" Quentin opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "Because I accessed the cloud backup of the precinct server this morning using my federal clearance, I have the video. I also have the logs showing you tried to delete it." Quentin turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, my father is in a diabetic crisis. He has been denied medication for 18 hours in violation of the 8th Amendment. You will release him on his own recognizance immediately so I can take him to a hospital. If you do not, I will personally add your name to the federal civil rights lawsuit I'm filing this afternoon. And Judge, I don't lose." Judge Langford looked at Holloway, then at the federal agent who looked like he could tear the building down with his bare hands. The judge swallowed hard. The power dynamic had shifted instantly. The predator was now the prey. "Release him," Langford squeaked. "Now get him out of here." The emergency room at Oak Haven General was quiet. Wendell was hooked up to an 4-drip, color slowly returning to his cheeks. He was sleeping, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that finally soothed the rage burning in Quentin's gut. Quentin stood by the window watching the parking lot. He made a phone call. "It's me," Quentin said. "I need the team." "Yes, the full extraction team." "No, not for a bust yet, for forensic auditing." "Bring the cyber division guys." He hung up as the door opened. It wasn't a doctor, it was Dax Holloway. And he wasn't alone. He had brought 2 other officers, his boys, Vaughn, and a gargantuan man named Russo. They weren't in uniform. They were in street clothes looking like thugs. You got a lot of nerve, Holloway hissed, closing the door behind him, coming into my town, embarrassing me in my court. Quentin didn't turn around. He kept watching the parking lot. Your town? You think you own the asphalt, Holloway? I own what happens here, Holloway said, stepping closer. You're FBI, good for you. But out here, federal badges don't stop bullets. Accidents happen. Cars run off the road. Quentin finally turned. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just lured a deer into a canyon. Are you wearing a wire, Holloway? What? Are you wearing a wire? Because everything in this room is being recorded. Quentin pointed to the small blinking light on his phone propped on the bedside table. And you just threatened a federal agent with assassination. Holloway laughed nervously. You're bluffing. You think you can scare me? My brother-in-law runs the impound. My cousin is the mayor. You can't touch me. Quentin walked forward until he was toe-to-toe with Holloway. Quentin was 3 inches taller and carried a density of muscle and training that Holloway's gym bro physique couldn't match. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Quentin said softly. I'm not going to arrest you today. Would be too easy. I'm going to take my father home. Then I'm going to go to my hotel room, order room service, and I'm going to open up your life. I have nothing to hide. Holloway spat. Everyone has something, Quentin said, and I found yours. The seized cash from drug bust that never made it to the evidence locker. The 2018 Silverado you bought in cash 2 days after a raid. The emails between you and the impound lot regarding auctioning off cars that shouldn't have been towed. Holloway's eyes widened. How? I told you, Quentin whispered, I'm the ghost. I was inside your computer before I even entered the state. Now get out of my sight before I decide to skip the investigation and just break your jaw in self-defense. Holloway backed up. For the first time in his life, the bully felt true fear. He motioned to his goons and they retreated into the hallway. But the war had just begun. Quentin sat back down by his father's bed. His laptop dinged. A file transfer was complete. It was a dossier sent by his analyst in Quantico. Subject, the Oak Haven Brotherhood. It wasn't just Holloway, it was the whole department. They were running a protection racket for local meth cooks, taking a cut of the profits in exchange for looking the other way. And the center of the web wasn't the chief. It was Holloway. He was the bagman. Quentin looked at his sleeping father. He touched the bruise on the old man's face. They messed with the wrong mailman, Quentin whispered. He opened a new email window. Destination, Internal Affairs Division and FBI Public Corruption Unit. Subject, Operation Broken Batch. He typed. I am requesting immediate authorization for a Title III wiretap on the personal devices of Officer Dax Holloway and Judge Everett Langford. Probable cause attached. He hit send. The karma wasn't going to be a slap on the wrist, it was going to be a demolition. Later that night, the air in Oak Haven was thick with impending rain, the kind of heavy static atmosphere that makes dogs bark at shadows. Officer Dax Holloway paced the stained carpet of the back office at Oak Haven Towing and Recovery. The blinds were drawn. The only light came from a flickering fluorescent strip overhead and the glow of a half-empty bottle of bourbon on the desk. Sitting behind the desk was Judge Everett Langford, looking far less imperious than he did on the bench. He was sweating, his tie loosened, his hands shaking as he poured another drink. Leaning against the filing cabinets were Officers Vaughn and Russo, looking like nervous teenagers caught skipping school. You need to fix this, Dax, Langford hissed, slamming his glass down. Do you know who that guy is? I made some calls. Quentin Washington isn't just an agent. He's the guy they send when they want to burn a place to the ground legally. He took down the Juarez cartel's distribution hub in Chicago last year. Single-handedly. I don't care who he is, Holloway snapped, though his voce cracked. He's on my turf. He's one man. He has the Department of Justice behind him, Langford yelled. He's already subpoenaed my bank records, Dax. My offshore accounts in the Caymans. If he finds the transfers from the meth cooks, we all go to prison for life. Holloway stopped pacing. A dark, desperate idea was forming in his eyes. It was the logic of cornered animal. Vicious and irrational. He won't find anything if we discredit him first, Holloway whispered. How? Vaughn asked, his voice trembling. The old man? Holloway said, a cruel grin spreading across his face. He was a mailman for 40 years, right? Perfect cover. We say he wasn't just delivering letters. We say he was moving product. We say the reason he resisted arrest was because he was high. Langford stared at him. You want to frame Wendell Washington with his son in TWN? We don't just frame him, Holloway said, pulling a heavy vacuum-sealed bag of white powder from his tactical vest. It was a kilo of cocaine seized from a bus 3 months ago and never logged into evidence. We raid the house tonight. We find this under his mattress. We arrest him for trafficking. Then we tell the FBI boy, back off or your daddy dies in prison as a drug lord. The room went silent. It was insanity. It was suicide. But to men drunk on power and fear, it looked like a lifeline. Do it, Langford whispered. Get the warrant. I'll sign it right now. Predated to yesterday. Holloway grabbed the warrant, his adrenaline spiking. Vaughn, Russo, gear up. We're going hunting. 2 miles away, inside a nondescript plumbing van parked down the street, a digital recorder spun silently. Quentin Washington sat in the dark, headphones over his ears. His face was illuminated only by the spectral green glow of the audio visualizer. He had tapped Langford's phone hours ago, but the bug in the impound lot office, that was a masterpiece of old-school tradecraft he'd planted while Holloway was busy threatening him at the hospital. He heard every word. That's conspiracy to commit felonies, Quentin whispered to the empty van. Fabricating evidence, racketeering, corruption of a public official. He pressed a button on his console. Alpha Team, this is Ghost. Did you copy that? A voice crackled in his ear, crisp and professional. We copied, sir. The attack team is in position. Perimeter is set. Hold your fire, Quentin ordered, his voice cold as ice. Let them breach. I want them to plant it. I want them to commit the act. We take them down when the trap snaps shut. Roger that. Standing by. Quentin took off the headphones. He picked up his Sig Sauer P320 and checked the chamber. He didn't feel anger anymore. He felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a reaper sharpening his scythe. The midnight air over Oak Haven was thick enough to choke on. A summer storm had finally broken, but it brought no relief. Only a rhythmic, violent drumming of rain against the shingles of Wendell Washington's modest bungalow. Inside the house was a sanctuary of shadows. The smell of peppermint and old books, usually so comforting, now feked the atmosphere of a waiting room at the edge of a cliff. Wendell sat in his favorite wingback chair, his hands resting on the armrest. He was dressed in his threadbare flannel pajamas and a robe. To any outside observer peering through the blinds, he looked like a frail old man lost in thought, but his eyes were sharp, fixed on the front door. 10 minutes out, a voice whispered from the darkness of the kitchen. Quentin Washington stepped into the sliver of light cast by a street lamp outside. The transformation was complete. The son Wendell knew, the boy who used to help him sort mail during the Christmas rush, was gone. In his place stood a high-tier federal operative. Quentin was clad in matte black tactical gear. A heavy Kevlar vest with FBI emblazoned in subdued gray across the chest. A communication headset was looped over his ear and a specialized sidearm sat high on his hip. "Quentin," Wendell said softly, his voice steady despite the tremors in his legs. "You're sure they're coming?" "A man doesn't just throw his whole life away over a traffic stop," Quentin replied, his voice a low, vibrating baritone. "It's not about the traffic stop anymore, Dad. It's about the fact that you saw his face. You saw the crack in the mask. Holloway's a narcissist with a badge. To him, you aren't a human being. You're a loose thread that could unravel his entire tapestry of lies. He thinks he's coming here to bury a problem. He doesn't realize he's walking into a graveyard of his own making." Quentin moved with the silence of a predator, checking the perimeter of the living room. He had spent the last 3 hours turning his father's home into a high-tech kill box. Not for life, but for reputation and freedom. Tiny pinhole cameras were embedded in the bookshelf, the molding, and even the grandfather clock. High-gain microphones were hidden under the lace doilies on the end tables. "Stay in the chair, Pop. No matter what happens, no matter what they say, do not stand up until I give the word. I need the cameras to see every inch of their movement." "I trust you, son," Wendell said, "but be careful. That man, there's a darkness in him that doesn't care about rules." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Quentin whispered. He vanished back into the kitchen shadows just as the sound of a heavy engine idling at the end of the block cut through the rain. Outside, a blacked-out Oak Haven police SUV slid to a halt at the curb. There were no sirens, no flashing lights, just the heavy metallic thunk of doors closing. Officer Dax Holloway stepped onto the wet asphalt, his face twisted into a mask of grim determination. Behind him were Vaughn and Russo. They weren't wearing their standard patrol gear. They had opted for entry kits, heavy vests, and balaclavas, though Holloway kept his face uncovered. He wanted Wendell to see him. He wanted the old man to know exactly who was destroying him. "Remember," Holloway hissed, leaning against the side of the SUV, "this is a high-risk narcotics warrant. If the old man reaches for anything, even a TV remote, you treat it as a threat. But the priority is the plant. I put the brick in the chair. We find it. We cuff him. If the Fed son is there, we detain him for obstruction and let he lawyers figure it out later." "What if the Fed pulls a gun?" Vaughn asked, his voice shaking. Holloway patted the heavy holster on his thigh. "Then he's a threat to officer safety. We're local law enforcement executing a signed warrant by a judge. We have the HIH ground." Holloway pulled a heavy breaching ram from the trunk. He felt a surge of adrenaline, the same sick thrill he'd felt since he was a bully on the high school playground. He loved the power of the entry. He loved the moment a person's private sanctuary was shattered by the boot of authority. They moved up the walkway in a staggered line, the rain hammering against their gear. Holloway reached the porch, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. He didn't knock. He didn't announce. "Police." Crack. Boom. The breaching ram hit the doorframe with the force of a small explosion. The deadbolt didn't just give way. It disintegrated, sending splinters of oak flying into the hallway. "Police. Search warrant. Get down on the ground." The three men stormed into the living room, their weapon-mounted lights cutting through the darkness like lightsabers. The beams bounced off the walls, illuminating the dust motes and the terrified, squinting face of Wendell Washington. "Don't move." "Hands in the air," Holloway screamed, his Glock 17 leveled directly at Wendell's chest. Wendell remained in the chair, his hands raised, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "What is this? What are you doing?" "Shut up," Holloway roared. "We have a warrant for these premises. We have credible intelligence of a narcotics distribution hub in this house." Wendell wheezed. "I've lived here 40 years. I've never even had a parking ticket. People change, Pops. Holloway signaled to Vaughn and Russo. Clear the back. Find the son. The two officers disappeared into the hallway, their heavy boots thumping against the floorboards. Holloway stood alone in the living room with Wendell. This was the moment. He reached into the cargo pocket of his tactical pants and pulled out a heavy vacuum-sealed package of white powder. He leaned over Wendell, his face inches from the old man's. The smell of rain and cheap cigarettes wafted off him. You should have just taken the ticket, Wendell. You should have just kept your mouth shut about your rights. With a practiced, fluid motion, Holloway shoved the bag deep into the side of the wingback chair, wedging it down between the cushion and the frame. He then stood back, pulled his radio to his shoulder, and spoke into the dead air. Dispatch. I have a visual on a large quantity of suspected Schedule II narcotics in the primary seating area. Suspect is being detained. He looked back at Wendell and smirked. Looks like your retirement just got moved to the state penitentiary. Is that it, Dax? The voice didn't come from Wendell. It came from the corner of the room near the darkened kitchen. Holloway spun around, his light swinging wildly. The beam landed on Quentin Washington, who was standing perfectly still, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He didn't have to. He Washington. Holloway shouted, his aim shaky. Get on the ground. You're interfering with a felony investigation. I'm not interfering, Dax. I'm observing, Quentin said, stepping forward into the light. I'm observing a local officer plant a kilo of cocaine in a private residence. I'm observing a violation of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments, all in one go. It's actually quite impressive how many laws you can break in under 60 seconds. I found this in the chair, Holloway screamed, pointing at the bag he had just hidden. I have witnesses. You mean Vaughn and Russo? Quentin asked. From the back of the house, the sound of a struggle erupted, but it wasn't the sound of police arresting a suspect. It was the sound of professional surgical takedowns. Two muffled thuds, the clatter of dropped weapons, and the distinct zip of heavy-duty flex cuffs. Vaughn Russo. Holloway called out, his voice rising in pitch. They won't answer you, Dax. Quentin said. They're currently being detained by the FBI's hostage rescue team. You see, I didn't come here alone. I brought 30 of my closest friends. They've been in the crawl space, the attic, and the neighbor's yard since sunset. Suddenly, the house was flooded with light. Not from flashlights, but from high-intensity tactical beacons placed outside the windows. The front door, the back door, and the windows were suddenly filled with gray-clad figures in full battle rattle. FBI, drop the weapon. The command came from a dozen voices at once. Red laser dots blossomed across Holloway's chest, neck, and forehead. He looked like he had been caught in a web of crimson light. Holloway's hand trembled. The Glock felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He looked at Quentin, then at Wendell, who was now standing up slowly, his face no longer showing fear, but a profound, weary sadness. Drop it, Dax. Quentin said softly. It's over. The warrant you had Langford sign, we intercepted the digital trail of that 2 hours ago. The cocaine, we've been tracking that batch since it vanished from your evidence locker in March. We have the audio of you planning this in the towing office. We have it all. Holloway looked around the room. He saw the tiny camera lenses he had missed. He saw the professional coldness in the eyes of the federal agents surrounding him. The world he had built, a world of fear, intimidation, and good old boy justice, was collapsing inward. His fingers loosened. The Glock hit the carpet with a dull thud. Quentin walked forward. He didn't tackle him. He didn't scream. He simply reached out, grabbed Holloway by the front of his vest, and spun him around. He clicked a pair of heavy steel cuffs onto Holloway's wrists. Real cuffs. Not the plastic ones used on the trash. Dax Holloway. Quentin whispered into the officer's ear. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it, because every word you've said for the last 10 years is about to be used to bury you. As the agents led a staggering, broken Holloway out into the rain, Quentin turned to his father. He reached out and straightened Wendell's robe. You okay, Pop? Wendell looked at the shattered door, then at the bag of poison sitting on his chair. He took a deep breath, the first clean breath he'd taken since the traffic stop. I'm fine, son. Wendell said. I just keep thinking, how many people didn't have a son like you? How many people are sitting in a cell right now because that man decided he didn't like the way they looked? Quentin's jaw tightened. Tomorrow, we start going through his old cases. Every single one of them. We're going to clear the deck, Dad. I promise. Outside, the blue and red lights of the FBI vehicles illuminated the rain, casting a flickering glow of genuine justice over the house on Pine Street. The raid was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The morning after the raid on Pine Street did not bring the usual quiet of a small-town dawn. Instead, Oak Haven woke to the sound of low-flying helicopters and the sight of black SUVs parked outside City Hall. The Oak Haven Brotherhood, a shadow government that had ruled through back-alley deals and intimidated into silence for 2 decades, was being dismantled in broad daylight. Quentin Washington sat in a makeshift command center established in the local community center. The walls were covered in whiteboards detailing a web of corruption that stretched far beyond a single roadside assault. On one side of the room, forensic accountants were digging through the digital remains of Judge Everett Langford's private accounts. On the other, a team of internal affairs officers from the state capitol were processing the badges of every officer in the 4th precinct. Quentin hadn't slept. He stood before a two-way mirror looking into an interrogation room where Judge Everett Langford sat. The judge, stripped of his black robes and his polished mahogany bench, looked remarkably small. He was nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. His expensive silk tie discarded on the table like a dead snake. Quentin entered the room. He didn't bring a notepad or a weapon. He simply sat down and placed a single file on the table. It was the transcript of the secret recording from the impound lot, the moment Langford had agreed to sign the predated warrant for the drug plant. It's a beautiful morning, Everett. Quentin said, his voice deceptively pleasant. The birds are singing, the sun is up, and the federal grand jury just returned 34 indictments for racketeering, conspiracy, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Your name is at the very top. Langford's hand shook as he reached for his coffee. I was coerced, Quentin. Holloway's a loose cannon. He threatened me. He told me if I didn't play ball, he'd find evidence on me, too. I'm a victim here. Quentin leaned forward, his eyes turning to Flint. You're a victim of your own greed. We found the offshore account in the Caymans, Everett. The Langford Trust. Every time Holloway's brother-in-law auctioned off a seized vehicle that didn't belong to the state, 10% went into that account. Every time you gave a maximum sentence to a local rival of the meth cooks you were protecting, another 5% went in. You didn't just sign warrants. You sold the scales of justice for a vacation home and a bloated ego. Langford looked down, his silence an admission of defeat. Here's the deal. Quentin continued. The U.S. attorney is looking to make an example. They want the death penalty for the civil rights violations that resulted in the disappearances of those 3 men we found under the impound lot concrete. But if you give us the mayor and the city council members who are taking the kickbacks, maybe you spend the rest of your life in a medium security facility instead of a cage with the men you sent to death row. Langford looked up, a glimmer of the old calculating politician returning to his eyes. I want it in writing. You'll get it when the truth comes out. Quentin said, standing up, and not a second before. The next stop was the cell block where Dax Holloway was being held. Unlike Langford, Holloway wasn't looking for a deal. He was catatonic, staring at the cinder block wall of his cell. The realization had finally set in. He was no longer the apex predator. In the hierarchy of a federal prison, a disgraced racist cop is at the very bottom of the food chain. Quentin stood at the bars. He didn't feel the surge of triumph he expected. He felt a profound sense of exhaustion. This wasn't just about one man. It was about a system that had allowed a bully to thrive. "Holloway," Quentin said. The man turned slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, his buzz cut matted with sweat. "You think you're a hero, don't you? You think you saved this town." "I don't care about being a hero," Quentin replied. "I care about the fact that my father couldn't drive to the pharmacy without being hunted by the person paid to protect him. I care about the 32 cases we've already identified where you planted evidence on people who couldn't afford a lawyer to fight back." Holloway let out a dry, hacking laugh. "They were all guilty of something. I just helped the process along. That's how the world works, Fed. You just got a bigger stick than I did." "No," Quentin said firmly. "The world works because men like my father believe in the law, even when the law fails them. You didn't just break his law, Dax. You tried to break his spirit, and that is why you're never going to see the sun as a free man again." As Quentin walked away, Holloway began to scream, a primal, incoherent sound of rage and terror that echoed through the sterile halls of the precinct. The final reckoning took place in the very courtroom where the story had first shifted. It was the day of the sentencing. The gallery was packed with the citizens of Oak Haven. There were families of the men found at the impound lot, elderly residents who had been harassed for years, and young men who had been cycled through the jail system on bogus charges. Wendell Washington sat in the front row wearing his best Sunday suit. He looked healthy, his skin vibrant, the bruise on his face a distant memory. Next to him sat Quentin, out of his tactical gear and back in the charcoal suit of a federal official. One by one, the defendants were led in. Vaughn and Russo, who had both turned state's evidence, were sentenced to 15 years each. Judge Langford received 30 years for racketeering and corruption. Then came Holloway. He was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The swagger was gone. He looked hunched, his shoulders pulled forward by the weight of the chains. The presiding federal judge, a woman known for her uncompromising stance on police corruption, looked down at Holloway. "Officer Holloway," she began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "You were given a badge and a gun. You were given the trust of this community. You used that trust to build a kingdom of fear. You targeted the vulnerable. You exploited the poor. And you attempted to destroy an honorable man simply because he stood up to your ego. The evidence against you is not just overwhelming. It is an indictment of every moment you spent in uniform." She paused, looking at Wendell in the front row. "For the kidnapping and murder of the 3 individuals found on the impound property, for the systematic racketeering of Oak Haven, and for the civil rights violations against Wendell Washington, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will be transported to a maximum security federal facility immediately." A gasp went through the courtroom, followed by a wave of applause that the bailiffs didn't even try to stop. As Holloway was being led out, he had to pass by the front row. He stopped for a split second, his eyes meeting Wendell's. For months, Holloway had practiced a look of defiance, a way to show he wasn't broken. But Wendell spoke first. "I forgive you, Dax," the old man said softly. Holloway flinched as if he had been struck. He didn't want forgiveness, he wanted hatred. Hatred he could understand. Hatred was the currency he dealt in. But the grace of the man he tried to ruin was a weight he couldn't carry. He looked away, his head bowing low as the marshals pulled him through the side door and into the annals of history. Later that afternoon, the sun began to set over the hills of Oak Haven, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The town felt lighter. The police signs on the precinct had been covered with state police banners as the transition to a new monitored department began. Quentin and Wendell stood on the porch of the Pine Street bungalow. The door had been repaired, the wood polished until it shone. "You're really staying, Quentin?" Wendell asked, leaning against the railing. "The DOJ wants me to oversee the transition for at least a year," Quentin said. "They're calling it the Oak Haven model. They want to see if we can rebuild a department from the ground up using transparency and community oversight. I told them I'd stay as long as the coffee is good and you keep telling me those old stories about the postal route." Wendell chuckled, patting his son on the shoulder. "The coffee's always good here, son. And the stories? Well, now we have a new one to tell. One about a boy who didn't forget where he came from." They stood together in the quiet, watching the neighbors walk by. People waved. Some stopped to say, "Thank you." For the first time in 20 years, the residents of Oak Haven didn't look over their shoulders when they saw a black SUV. They saw a guardian. They saw the truth. The Sunday driver had finished his route and for the first time in a long time the road ahead was clear. In the end, Dax Holloway learned the hardest lesson a bully can face. The height of your power is exactly how far you have to fall. He thought a badge gave him the right to play God, but he forgot that true power doesn't come from a gun or a uniform. It comes from integrity. By attacking a man he thought was defenseless, he invited a reckoning that dismantled a decades-long empire of corruption. Wendell Washington got his justice and Oak Haven got its soul back. It serves as a haunting reminder that while the wheels of justice sometimes grind slowly, when they are fueled by the truth they are absolutely unstoppable. Some call it the law. Others call it destiny. We just call it the ultimate karma. If this story of justice and a son's loyalty moved you, don't let it end here. Stories like this need to be heard to remind us that no one is above the law. Please hit that like button to help the YouTube algorithm spread this message of accountability. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the world's most incredible stories of karma and redemption. What did you think of Quentin's trap? Did Holloway get what he deserved or was the ending too kind? Drop a comment below. We read every single one. Thank you for watching and remember the truth always finds a way out. We'll see you in the next one.